Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you had a very wonderful Merry Christmas, and next time I see you, Happy New Year. Today we're going to get into the worst of the worst 2023 as a recap, not to be negative, but to avoid these things so we can have a better new year and not make a lot of these common and very consequential mistakes. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into it. These are some of the top three, we'll say. These are the top three biggest mistakes I've seen in estate planning this year. Okay. The first one is failing to update a will or an estate plan. So, not that you don't even do it, but that you don't update it. And all of these mistakes are real life situations that have happened that I've seen just in this year of 2023, some multiple times. Okay. So let's get into the failure to update. A lot of people think estate planning is one and done. I have a will and that's it, and nothing ever needs to change again. Or I made a trust and I never need to do anything again. And that is very inaccurate. It's very wrong. There's almost nothing in life that you need to do only one time and set it and forget it. You never just pay the mortgage one time. Okay. You pay it every month. The water bill, you pay it every month. Excuse me. Your breath, you do it every second, right? You don't just take one breath for the rest of your life. So everything has to continually be reviewed, repeated, to be maintained. And the estate plan is no different. So there's been a few situations like this, but one in particular I'm thinking about where there was an estate plan done, everything was executed, all the wishes were properly, documented and everything. But the problem was it was done 30 years ago. So what are the backs of trying to bring a 30-year-old document into the future, right? Trying to go by something that is 30 years old. Well, there's three. First, obviously, outdated circumstances. So things today are clearly not the same as they were 30 years ago. Okay, 30 years ago, I was not the same person that I am today. 30 years ago, I was still in elementary school, right? 30 years ago, there were no cell phones. Okay, 30 years ago, there was no YouTube. There was no YouTube. There was barely YouTube 20 years ago. I think it's only been around for 15 years. So, outdated circumstances, things change. And as things change, we need to keep up with the times. And so, if we have something that we set for 30 years ago, the circumstances will change if we don't change them to keep up with the years that go by. Uh, second, so first is outdated circumstances. Obviously, things 30 years ago are not the same as they are today. Things 10 years ago are not the same as they are today. Sometimes even things just 5 years ago, 1 year ago, right? We see it every day with the pandemic. So many things have changed. This is 2023. We're getting ready to move into 2024. So less than 5 years, right? Because the pandemic was 2020. The world has changed dramatically. And so we can't be allowing ourselves to stagnate. We have to continue to change with the world. So outdated circumstances. Two, expired intentions. So once again, the people that we were 30 years ago are different than the people we are now. The things we were wanting 30 years ago, the things we were hoping for 30 years ago are different than what they are now. If we 30 years ago intended to leave a house to, our child, 30 years later, we can have grandchildren. We can have multiple homes. We can have a business that we want to leave into the family, right? The intentions change. Is it still just that one thing we want to do? We would hope that in 30 years, we have many more things that we want to do. In 10 years, we have many more things that we want to do, right? So we can't allow time to dictate our intentions. We do. And we have to use time to bring them about and not just set it and forget it or set it and allow time to take over. That's not what we want to do. And then this one is really important. We kind of hinted to it in others. So again, the biggest mistake we're talking about, failure to update an estate plan. Number one, because outdated circumstances. Number two, expired intentions. Number three, changed family dynamics. People, again, are not the same as they were 30 years ago. They're in different stations of life. Once again, I was in elementary school 30 years ago. Many senior citizens today were in their 20s or early 30s 30 years ago. Even 10 years. A lot of the young kids that are really driving like TikTok and things like that 10 years ago, they were elementary school students. Everything is different. People are different. Family is different. Maybe 20 years ago, grandchild didn't exist. Maybe 20 years ago, you didn't even have a kid, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. And the example that I don't like to use it, but it just goes to really show that even the best of us, time can get us, okay? And that's why we must just be on top of it as much as we can. So I use the story of Kobe Bryant. Speaking of the pandemic, he tragically passed away right in the beginning of 2020, right when the pandemic was like kind of creeping around, and then it just blew up all over the world. And his death was just, it resonated with so many people around the world. And I remember at the time I was thinking about, oh my goodness, he has these 4 little girls. He just had a new baby. And come to find out, she was so new. She was only maybe 6 months or so. Because she was so new, and we knew Kobe was a very meticulous thinker, very calculating, very careful. So his estate plan was set, it was ready, it was good, and the changes were made as needed. But because she was still so new, she hadn't been updated to the trust yet. And so, it doesn't have to be 20 years, it doesn't have to be 10 years, it doesn't have to be 30 years. It can be 6 months, and life can change dramatically. 6 months, right? And so, that just put a wrinkle into the plans. Probate had to get involved. I believe it worked out. I haven't followed, but just even that small amount of time, 6 months, is so critical to just the impact of life and what can happen in it, and how failing to take that into account. Not to say that he wouldn't have got around to it, but we just never know. We never know, especially as we come upon another year. We don't know what another year has in store for us. We don't know how many of us are going to make it into this new year, how many of us are going to make it beyond the new year, right? So we can't take that for granted. When it comes to our plans, when it comes to making our plans, we don't know what's going to happen, but we have to be on top of it as much as possible. And then, aside from change family dynamics, like adding a new family member, right? Having a new child, also losing family members. And one thing I've seen so often, and it seems to just be getting worse, and it doesn't matter the age, is kind of denigrating family dynamics, right? Family dynamics that are getting worse, especially among siblings. Siblings fight among toys when they're little. They will fight about houses when they get older. Okay, they will. It's happened many times I've seen in the past, including this year. They will not agree. They will fight. And 30 years ago, maybe, or 20 years ago, they had a better relationship, or maybe it was just kind of starting to break a little bit. But with the passage of time, it's only hardened, and now it's almost impossible uh, to get a good feeling back, right? Because so much time has passed, and that that negativity has just set in, and so there's nothing you can really do. It's almost like you reach an impasse. Something's got to give one way or another. So those kind of changed family dynamics too, not just the addition of new people, marriages perhaps, right? Step families with stepmother, stepfather, all those things, and stepchildren, but just the souring of a lot of family relationships also. And time has a lot to do with that. So that's why it's so important. You cannot set it and forget it. Your life is constantly changing. Your plans have to keep up with those changes. That's the bottom line when it comes to the biggest mistake. Number one, failing to update an estate plan. Okay. Excuse me. Number two is failing to leave or inform beneficiaries on your accounts. All right. So when I say this, I'm talking about things like a bank account or a life insurance policy, where you can leave what's known as a beneficiary, which is someone that you name to take over the money if something were to happen to you. Excuse me. So, for example, if you have, let's say, $10,000 in a savings account that only you own, if you say, well, if something happens to me, I want my brother to take over, then you name him as a beneficiary and it'll go to him, right? If something happened to you, it'll bypass any kind of court processes. The person named individual just has to go to the bank with their ID and death certificate, and they can collect the funds. Just transfer, that simple. Okay. It's also known as a transfer on death or a paid on death account in the case of life insurance, because that's when the proceeds get paid out. when you pass away. But the mistake is failing to either leave a beneficiary in the first place or failing to inform the beneficiary that they are the beneficiary on that account. All right. And this has happened this year. Uh, this has happened so many years in the past. But there are three reasons, again, that this is just so critical. Number one is delayed funds. So just think about a person passing away and their family being dependent upon them, especially if it was like a parent, a husband, a spouse, right? Where their income is it's a good portion of how they provide for their family and how the family depends on them. And they have some of it locked away in a bank account, let's say, and pass away, and there's nobody on the beneficiary. There's nobody named. Or if there's somebody named, we don't know it. We don't know how to get to it. Banks, life insurance companies, they will not tell you. They will not tell you. They don't have to. They're kind of outside of court and all that stuff. They will not tell you unless they get court paperwork to say that you are the person authorized to know this information. Okay, so I'm going to give a real life example of what happened this year before I go into the other couple of reasons. So this happened literally this year, about 6 months ago or so, where a husband had passed away and wife needed access to his bank account. They had separate bank accounts. They had one joint one, but they also had separate ones. And the husband had been sick. There was no power of attorney done so that wife could have been named to access those funds right before anything happened. So none of that. And the bank wouldn't tell them anything because they don't have to. They're not obligated to, right? It's almost illegal for them to, right? Because it's against their policy. But wife knew that there was about $80,000 sitting in that account. Could not touch it though, because nobody knew who the beneficiary was, right? Wasn't sure if it was wife, wasn't sure if there was one on there at all. There was nothing. And so you have $80,000 tied up in a bank account that nobody can get to. Think of what you can do with that kind of money if there was a simple beneficiary transfer, right? You could pay some bills off, right? You don't have to worry about mortgage. You don't have to worry about like just the basic everyday routine of life when you're grieving the love of your life. I mean, it can go such a long way, but this happened. This happened because there was nothing there. Fortunately, that was resolved within the next couple of months, but we're talking about 2 months lost of $80,000. And this is not the only time something like this has happened. I've seen 6 months of thousands of dollars lost because nobody knew who was on the policy. This happens so often, and it's just unfortunate because it doesn't have to be that way. The funds are delayed, so that means your family's well-being is delayed for the time being. Open to court. That's number two. If there's no beneficiary named or we don't know who it is and we can't find out, you got to go to court. You got to go to probate court. Somebody has to open up a probate estate for the person that passed away and be named the authorized representative of that estate so that they can be the one to go to the bank. They can be the one to contact the insurance policy and find out even who the beneficiary is if there is one. So number one, they got to go there to find out who the beneficiary is because the company won't tell you otherwise. Number two, if there is no beneficiary, now the funds have to go to the probate court process and they can get eaten away by administrative fees, attorney fees, debts, things like that. You don't want to leave that kind of money open to the court process if you don't have to. That's why it's so critical to leave a beneficiary, number one, and tell somebody, tell them who it is. And then, of course, number three, it can go to the wrong people if you perhaps fail to update. So also talking about change like family dynamics, we talked about in the first example, failing to update your plans. Divorce happens a lot. If you have a former spouse on a policy and you don't change it, that former spouse can still potentially get the policy. Now, a lot of it is going to depend on what's in the divorce decree. But when it comes to, again, these kind of outside institutions that are not bound by the court itself, They have their own policies. Usually they will just pay out to whoever is named as a beneficiary. So if you don't update it, you have a former spouse on there, or maybe even a former friend that you really cared about, they did you wrong or something like that. Doesn't matter who it is. If their name is on there, they can still get the funds. You want to make sure that it doesn't go to those wrong people. So that's number one, just changing the beneficiary. But number two, also making sure you have one on there so that it will not go to court. And so then it won't follow the court's default of who can get what. You want to make sure that you are in control of your money so you know where your money is going when you're gone. That's on you, and you can do that. So failing to leave informed beneficiaries, that is the second biggest mistake that I've seen this year. And then the third biggest mistake is going to court too soon. And so a lot of people, when they have disagreements, when they have conflicts, they want to go to court right away. And I'm always telling people, do never, 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 never go to court immediately. Never go to court right away, because once you're there, you don't get out. The only way in is the way, or the only way out is the way you came in, is through the court process. It's very rigid, it's very time consuming, and a lot of disagreements you can handle outside of court. Okay. But this also goes to when it comes to estate planning, people go to court thinking that they need to go there for things they can actually do simpler, quicker, faster, and with so much less hassle outside of court, particularly when it comes to powers of attorney. So, and I'll give a real life example of why this really hurts from going to court too soon. So, um, elderly mother was becoming a little bit more physically tired and weakened, and not wanting to do a lot of, like, banking work and kind of handling things on her own just from physical exhaustion, and asked adult daughter to become her legal guardian. Okay, sounds good, right? Go to court, get a guardianship process going. That's approved. But the problem is that didn't need to go to court. That could have been resolved with a simple power of attorney outside of court. Um, no court process, no court authorization. And now that has to continue to be in court every single year, renewed, 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 until basically there's a reason to terminate it. And then the bad part about this was that deemed her mother legally incapacitated. So it's like she can't function on her own, which is not necessarily true, because she still had her mental stability. It's just that physically she was weakened. So going to court too soon was a wrong idea, because the same thing could have been accomplished without court intervention, without that court determination, by executing a power of attorney to just name daughter to be able to do her routine activities. All right. So with going to court, you have a loss of flexibility, right? Because the court is overseeing the process. You need to file reports every year. You need to file the paperwork to be able to become the official person. You need to file the court fees. You need to pay all that. And this is just continue on a continuing basis, as opposed to doing a one-time power of attorney, one and done. And if you structure it correctly, a power of attorney can last the rest of your life. It expires at your death. All right. Loss of time and money. So once again, you're paying time and money to the court dates, court fees, court process. Like, it's going there. It has to go there because that's the only way it can come out. And then added unnecessary responsibility. So because it's in court, there's a higher duty there. Even if you are outside of court, you become a power of attorney. Yes, you have to maintain a higher standard. You can't use the money for yourself. You can't do anything that's outside of the benefit of that person. But when it comes to court, there's an added level of supervision that can be abused a lot of times, because family can disagree, can argue, or the court can even see, no, I don't agree with these expenses. I don't think it was done correctly, X, Y, and Z. So you just have more intervention in your everyday personal affairs that is unnecessary. You don't need to do, where you could have done it and still maintain the same amount of integrity and care for the person you're looking after, without this, like, overseeing responsibility, this overseeing supervision of really just trying to do something on a routine day-to-day basis. And because of that, it's still in court, and it's nasty. You don't want to go there, number 1. You never wanna go to court first. Court is always your last option, okay? Your last resort. The only time where you go there first is if it's just so egregious that it has to be before, a public body. There has to be some kind of public accountability. Obviously, we see that with criminal courts all the time, right? But when it comes to the estate planning, where a lot of this stuff can be, especially when we're talking about family, when we're talking about property, when we're talking about money, essentially everything we do in our everyday life, a lot of that can stay private. And it probably should stay private because the publicity of it all just adds to the stress, and it adds to the tension, adds funds to it too, right? It adds to the money. And it's just not necessary. It's really not necessary. Okay. So in 2024, we're going to do better. In 2024, we're going to plan ahead of time. In 2024, we're going to review our plans. We're not going to make these common mistakes. Instead, we're going to take it upon ourselves to really be the people in our family that are going to set our family free, that are going to change the trajectory and the direction of our family. We are going to be the ones to say, it starts with me because it ends with me, right? All these mistakes end with me on all of the goodness and all the possibilities of a better future for the whole bloodline. It's going to start with me for 2024. That's my hope for you. It's my hope for you always. So please don't make these common mistakes. They happen all the time. Um, but the more educated you are about why they happen and how to avoid them, it's just really being more aware of the power you have to take control of your situation and exerting your power so that you can do that. And there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. There's always going to be risk associated with big rewards. But in this case, when it was talking about the future of your bloodline, the future of your family, how you want it to go, how you want it to be, the habits you want to build, the ones you want to break, it's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be worth the risk of hiring an attorney. It's gonna be worth the risk of perhaps, building something you've never built before, whether it's a business, whether it's investing in a home, whether it's setting aside money for somebody to go to college. The upsides are enormously more higher than the downsides. All right. And obviously, you can always consult with a professional to guide you through it. And a lot of times people just think that in and of itself is a risk, which it is. Everything is. Going outside every day, getting in a car to drive, one of the biggest risks we can take in life. But we do it because it's necessary to get us from where we are to where we want to go. Same thing applies with estate planning. Okay. So for 2024, I hope we do things better. We do things differently. The new year always brings about a new vision for life, a chance to do more, a chance to do better, a chance to bring in a brighter future. That's what it's all about. All right. So I'm wishing you a very blessed and prosperous 2024. And we will see you in 2024 by 2023. See you next year.